What's the reason you keep avoiding your mom? That was the question my fiancé asked after I refused to invite her to our wedding planning brunch. I showed him the text she sent me 3 days after he proposed. He's settling for you because women his age wouldn't want him. Enjoy it while it lasts. I'm Olivia Castellanos, 28 years old, and my mother has spent my entire life making sure I know I'm not good enough. When Marcus proposed to me at our favorite restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan, I felt pure joy for exactly 72 hours. Then Mom's text arrived, and something inside me that had been cracking for years finally shattered completely. What she didn't know was that I had already started documenting everything. Every cruel text, every backhanded compliment delivered in front of others, every deliberate attempt to undermine my confidence. I had been building a case without even realizing it, collecting evidence like a lawyer preparing for trial. Marcus stared at his phone, reading the message 3 times, his jaw tightening with each pass. We were sitting in our apartment in Lincoln Park, surrounded by wedding magazines and venue brochures that suddenly felt meaningless. The morning sun streaming through our floor-to-ceiling windows seemed to dim as he processed my mother's words. How long has she been sending you messages like this? His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. My whole life, I said simply. Just usually not in writing. Growing up as Gloria Castellanos' only daughter meant living in a constant state of inadequacy. My mother was beautiful, successful, and acutely aware of both facts. She had built a thriving interior design business in downtown Chicago, becoming the go-to decorator for wealthy North Shore families who wanted their homes featured in architectural magazines. Her own home was a showpiece, a restored Victorian in Evanston that she treated like a living portfolio. Every room was photographed, every surface styled, every detail curated for maximum impact. I was the detail that never quite fit her aesthetic. Your hair is so mousy, she would say, running her fingers through my light brown waves while her own highlighted blonde hair caught the light. We should get you to my colorist. At parent-teacher conferences, she would smile at my teachers and say, Olivia is such a plotter, not naturally gifted like some children, but she tries so hard. When I made the honor roll, she would nod and mention that her friend's daughter had made high honors. When I got into Northwestern, she reminded everyone that it was a good backup school. The criticism was constant but always delivered with a smile, wrapped in concern, positioned as helpful guidance. For years I internalized it, believing that if I just tried harder, achieved more, looked better, she might finally approve of me. I dyed my hair blonde in high school. It made me look washed out, but Mom loved it. I majored in business instead of art, even though I loved painting, because she said creative fields were for people who couldn't hack real careers. I dated men she approved of, wore clothes she selected, decorated my first apartment exactly as she suggested. Nothing was ever enough. The pattern continued into my 20s. When I got my MBA and landed a position as a marketing director at a mid-sized tech company, Mom's first comment was about how her friend's son had gone to Harvard Business School and now worked for Google. When I bought my condo, she walked through pointing out everything I should change. When I showed her photos from a trip to Italy, she mentioned that she had been to the real Italy, the hidden places tourists never see. But Marcus was different from anything she had prepared me for. I met him at a work conference in San Francisco 18 months ago. He was the keynote speaker, a software engineer turned entrepreneur who had sold his company and now consulted with startups on sustainable growth. At 42, he was 14 years older than me, with silver threading through his dark hair and smile lines around his eyes that deepened when he laughed. He was brilliant, kind, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. Our conversation after his panel lasted 3 hours, spanning topics from venture capital trends to our favorite novels to whether deep dish pizza was actually pizza. We agreed it was. Chicago loyalty required it. He lived in Chicago too, in Lincoln Park, just 2 neighborhoods over from my condo in Lakeview. We had dinner the week after we both returned home. Then another dinner. Then weekend brunches and weeknight cooking sessions and lazy Sunday mornings reading the paper together. He made me laugh. He listened when I talked about work frustrations. He encouraged my painting, even converting his spare bedroom into a studio for me. He treated me like someone whose thoughts and feelings mattered, which was such a foreign experience that it took me months to fully trust it. When I introduced him to my mother 6 months into our relationship, I was nervous, but hopeful. Maybe she would see how happy I was. Maybe she would approve of his success, his intelligence, his obvious affection for me. Instead, she pulled me aside after dinner and said, "He's quite a bit older, isn't he? Men that age who date younger women usually have issues with women their own age. Just something to keep in mind." The comment lodged in my brain like a splinter. Marcus and I had already discussed our age difference. We were both aware of it and comfortable with it. But Mom's words planted a seed of doubt that kept growing. Was there something wrong with him? Was there something wrong with me for not seeing it? Over the next year, her comments escalated. At family gatherings, she would introduce Marcus as Olivia's older boyfriend, with emphasis on older. She would mention articles she had read about age gap relationships and power imbalances. She would tell stories about friends whose daughters had married older men and ended up divorced and broke. Each comment was delivered casually, almost as an afterthought, but they accumulated like small cuts. Marcus noticed but tried to brush it off. "She's your mom," he would say. "She probably just needs time to get used to me." But I could see it bothered him more than he admitted. The way his smile would tighten when she made one of her comments. The way he would go quiet on the drive home from family dinners. The proposal happened on a Tuesday evening in October. We had gone to Gibson's Steakhouse, where we had our first official date. After dinner, he suggested a walk along the Riverwalk, despite the cold wind coming off Lake Michigan. When we reached a quiet spot with the city lights reflecting on the dark water, he got down on one knee. "Olivia, you make every day better," he said, his voice steady despite the trembling of his hands. "You're brilliant and creative and the kindest person I know. I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me." The ring was perfect, a vintage sapphire surrounded by small diamonds that caught the light like stars. I said yes before he finished asking the question, and we stood there kissing while tourists took photos and a street musician played something romantic on his saxophone. For 3 days, I floated on pure happiness. I called my best friend Emma, who screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I told my colleagues at work, who organized an impromptu celebration with champagne smuggled into the office. I posted a photo of the ring on Instagram and watched the congratulations roll in. I waited until I saw Mom in person to tell her. We met for lunch at her favorite spot in Evanston, a trendy farm-to-table restaurant where she knew everyone. I showed her my hand, watching her face for a reaction. "Oh," she said, examining the ring. "It's very vintage. I suppose that's fitting given his age." The joy that had been filling my chest started to leak out like air from a punctured balloon. But I tried to maintain my smile. "We're thinking spring wedding," I said. "Nothing too big, maybe 75 people." "Spring?" She raised her perfectly shaped eyebrows. "That's quite soon. Are you sure you're not rushing into this?" "Mom, we've been together over a year." "Yes, but marriage is a big step, especially with someone so much older. Have you thought about what happens when you're 50 and he's 64? What if he gets sick? What if he can't keep up with you?" Each question felt like a small betrayal. I finished my salad quickly, made an excuse about work, and left. That evening, the text arrived. "He's settling for you because women his age wouldn't want him. Enjoy it while it lasts." I stared at those words for a long time, not because they hurt, though they did, but because they crystallized something I had been avoiding acknowledging. My mother didn't want me to be happy. She wanted me to be small and uncertain and dependent on her validation. My happiness with Marcus threatened the dynamic she had carefully constructed over 28 years. That's when I started taking screenshots. Every text, every voicemail, every email. I created a private folder on my phone labeled Documentation and began saving everything. I didn't have a plan yet, but some instinct told me I would need evidence of the pattern. Because people like my mother are careful. They deliver their cruelty with plausible deniability, always able to claim they were just concerned, just trying to help, just speaking hard truths that no one else would say. But text messages don't lie. Over the next 2 weeks, I collected more than I expected. Mom sent follow-up texts asking if I had really thought this through and suggesting I might want to keep my options open. She forwarded articles about divorce rates and age gap marriages. She called and left voicemails that started with concern, and ended with subtle undermining. When I didn't respond as she wanted, the messages grew sharper. "You've always been naive about men. I'm just trying to protect you from making a huge mistake. Don't come crying to me when this falls apart." Marcus wanted to confront her, but I held him back. "Not yet," I said, though I couldn't explain why. Some part of me was waiting, watching, gathering ammunition for a war I hadn't declared yet, but somehow knew was coming. The wedding planning began without my mother's involvement, which was my choice, though I framed it as consideration for her busy schedule. Emma became my unofficial wedding planner, helping me look at venues and sample cakes and choose flowers. It should have been joyful, and in many ways it was. But there was a shadow over everything, the absence where a mother should be, the phone that didn't ring with excited questions about my dress or the menu or the guest list. Then came the brunch invitation. Marcus's mother was flying in from Arizona for a week, and we wanted to introduce her to my mother over a casual brunch. Mrs. Fletcher was warm and enthusiastic about everything. She had sent care packages, called regularly to chat, and treated me like the daughter she never had. The contrast with my own mother was stark and painful. "I think it's time they met," Marcus said. "Your mom will come around when she sees how happy my mom is for us." But I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit there and watch my mother perform concern and care in front of Mrs. Fletcher while knowing what she really thought. I couldn't risk her saying something cutting disguised as humor that would poison the day. So I made excuses, said Mom was busy with a big project, suggested we wait until closer to the wedding. That's when Marcus asked the question that started this. "What's the reason you keep avoiding your mom?" And I showed him the text. He read it 3 times, and with each reading, I watched his face transform from confusion to anger, to something harder and more resolved. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were steel. "This is abuse," he said quietly. "You know that, right? This is emotional abuse." I wanted to defend her, to explain that she was just worried, that she meant well, that this was just how she was. But the words died in my throat because I knew he was right. This wasn't love or concern. This was control masquerading as care, cruelty wrapped in motherhood. "Show me the others," he said. So I did. I opened my documentation folder and handed him my phone, watching his expression darken as he scrolled through months of accumulated venom. Each message was another data point in a pattern of systematic diminishment, proof that this wasn't about protecting me, but about keeping me small. When he finished, he set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. "Olivia," he said, taking both my hands in his, "you need to understand something. This isn't going to get better. She's not going to suddenly support us. And if we let her, she will spend the next however many years trying to destroy what we have." "I know," I whispered, and I did know. I had always known, somewhere deep down. I just hadn't wanted to face it. So what do we do? I thought about all those screenshots, sitting in my phone like bullets in a chamber. I thought about the wedding we were planning, the life we were building, the happiness I deserved but had never felt entitled to claim. I thought about 28 years of small cruelties and large betrayals, all delivered with a smile. "We plan," I said finally. "We document everything. And when the time is right, we make sure everyone knows exactly who Gloria Castellanos really is." Marcus's eyes widened slightly. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking my mother has spent my entire life controlling the narrative about me. It's time someone controlled the narrative about her." The documentation phase became my secret project, a quiet rebellion that gave me purpose during sleepless nights when Mom's words echoed in my head. I created a detailed spreadsheet tracking every interaction: date, time, method of communication, and a summary of what was said. Each entry linked to a screenshot or recording saved in cloud storage with redundant backups. I was methodical about it, almost obsessive, treating it like a work project that required precision and thoroughness. Emma noticed the change in me during one of our wedding planning sessions. We were sitting in her Wicker Park apartment, looking at invitation samples. When she put down the cardstock she was examining and fixed me with a concerned look. "You seem different," she said carefully. "More focused, but also kind of intense. What's going on?" I considered brushing her off, but Emma had been my best friend since Northwestern. She had witnessed years of my mother's behavior at birthday parties and graduation ceremonies and holiday gatherings. If anyone would understand, it was her. I showed her the documentation folder. She went pale as she scrolled through the messages, her hand coming up to cover her mouth more than once. Jesus, Liv, how long has this been happening? Forever, but I only started saving proof recently. What are you going to do with all this? I don't know yet, but I need people to understand that I'm not the problem, that I never was. Emma set my phone down and pulled me into a fierce hug. You were never the problem, you brilliant, amazing woman. Your mom is a narcissistic nightmare, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say that out loud. Her validation cracked something open in my chest. For so long, I had believed that my perception was skewed, that I was being oversensitive, that my mother's behavior was somehow normal, or at least understandable. Having someone else confirm that it was wrong, that I had been wronged, felt like oxygen after years of suffocation. Marcus's mother arrived the following week, and the contrast between her and my own mother became even more pronounced. Carol Fletcher was warm and enthusiastic, peppering me with questions about the wedding plans and immediately offering to help with anything we needed. She brought gifts, homemade cookies, and a quilt she had made for our new life together. She cried happy tears when we showed her the venue we had chosen, a restored greenhouse in the Chicago Botanic Garden. I'm so happy Marcus found you, she said, squeezing my hand. He deserves someone as wonderful as you are. The words were so simple, so genuine, and so completely opposite of anything my mother had ever said to me that I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to compose myself. When I returned, I found Carol showing Marcus photos on her phone of him as a child, embarrassing stories told with obvious love. Your mom seems great, I said to Marcus later that night after Carol had gone to her hotel. Really great. She is, he agreed. But that's what mothers are supposed to be like, Liv. Supportive. Happy for their kids. Not. He gestured at my phone, where my documentation folder held dozens of messages proving otherwise. The next escalation came from an unexpected source. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's younger sister, called me out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at work. We weren't close. She lived in Boston, and I saw her maybe once every few years at family events, but her voice on the phone was urgent. Olivia, I need to tell you something, and I should have told you years ago. She took a deep breath. Your mother is saying terrible things about Marcus to the entire family. She's been calling everyone, telling them he's manipulative and controlling, that you're making a huge mistake, that someone needs to stage an intervention. My stomach dropped. What exactly is she saying? That he's isolating you from family, that he's pressuring you into marriage, that there's something suspicious about a man his age pursuing someone so much younger. She's painting herself as the concerned mother trying to save her daughter from an abuser. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so devastating. My mother, the actual abuser, was positioning Marcus as the threat while she played the hero in her own narrative. None of that is true, I said, my voice shaking. I know, honey. I've watched your mother do this same thing to other people for decades. She did it to me when I married someone she didn't approve of. She tried to turn our whole family against Robert, told everyone he was after my money, even though I was a broke grad student at the time. She only stopped when I cut her out completely. You cut her out? Best decision I ever made. It's why we're not close anymore, why I moved across the country. But I should have warned you sooner. I just hoped she would be different with her own daughter. Patricia's voice broke slightly. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. After we hung up, I sat in my office with the door closed, trying to process this new information. My mother wasn't just undermining me privately. She was conducting a campaign to destroy my relationship and reputation across our entire extended family. She was creating a narrative where I was the victim and she was the savior, positioning herself for maximum sympathy while ensuring that when things inevitably exploded, everyone would side with her. But she had made one critical mistake. She assumed I would never fight back. That evening, I called my cousin Rachel, who I had always been close with growing up. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. Liv, how's wedding planning going? That's actually why I'm calling. Have you talked to my mom recently? There was a pause, a telling hesitation. Yeah, actually, she called last week. She's really worried about you, Liv. She said Marcus is older and kind of controlling, that you're not acting like yourself. What else did she say? Just that she's concerned. That she thinks maybe you're rushing into things because you're afraid of being alone. That Marcus might be taking advantage of your insecurity. Rachel's voice softened. I told her that seemed harsh, but she insisted she was just looking out for you. I took a deep breath. Rachel, I'm going to send you something. It's a lot of screenshots of texts between me and Mom. I just want you to look at them and then tell me honestly what you think. Okay, she said slowly. But Liv, I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Please just look. I sent her a carefully curated selection of messages. The ones where Mom called Marcus too old, suggested he was settling for me, implied there was something wrong with both of us. The ones where she called me naive and said I would come crying to her when it fell apart. The ones where her concern looked less like love and more like sabotage. Rachel called back 20 minutes later, her voice tight. Holy shit, Liv. This is not a concerned mother. This is, I don't even know what to call this. Abuse, I said quietly. It's abuse. I had no idea. All these years, I thought you guys just had a normal, complicated mother-daughter thing. But this is, she trailed off. I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. She's good at hiding it. She only shows this side in private, and even then she makes it sound reasonable. Like she's just being honest or protective. What are you going to do? I'm still figuring that out, but I need you to know the truth before Mom spins this into something else. Over the next several days, I had similar conversations with other family members, my Uncle James, my cousin Mike, my grandmother's sister, Aunt Ellen. Each call followed the same pattern: initial defensiveness of my mother, shock when I showed them the evidence, apologies for not seeing it sooner. I wasn't trying to turn family against her, not yet. I was establishing the truth before her lies could take root too deeply. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marcus had a close friend named David Chen who worked in public relations, specifically crisis management for executives and public figures whose reputations needed protecting or rehabilitating. Over dinner at their house, Marcus mentioned my situation to David and his wife, Sarah. This is textbook narcissistic parent behavior, Sarah said immediately. She was a therapist who specialized in family trauma. The gaslighting, the image management, the campaign to control the narrative. Your mother is treating this like a PR war, and she's winning because she started before you even knew you were fighting. So what do I do? I asked. David leaned forward, his expression serious. You control the narrative. You get ahead of her story with the truth. But you do it strategically, not emotionally. You document everything, which you're already doing. You identify your key stakeholders, the people whose opinions matter most. And then you reveal the truth in a way that's irrefutable and impossible to spin. Like what? Like a wedding speech where you thank everyone for their support despite the challenges. Like a private family meeting where you present evidence. Like a carefully worded email to key family members laying out the facts. He paused. Or like all of the above, depending on how nuclear you want to go. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had spent my entire life trying to appease my mother, trying to be good enough to earn her love. The thought of deliberately exposing her, of going on the offensive instead of just defending myself, felt dangerous and wrong and absolutely necessary. I need to think about this, I said. That night, Marcus and I lay in bed talking through the options. He was supportive but cautious, worried about the emotional toll this would take on me. I just want you to be happy, he said, stroking my hair. If cutting her out quietly is easier, it's not about easier, I interrupted. It's about the truth. She's been lying about me, about us, to everyone. If I just walk away quietly, her version becomes the official story. I'm the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her concerned mother for some older man. Everyone feels sorry for her, and I'm the villain. So, we make sure everyone knows the truth. Exactly. The plan started taking shape over the following weeks. David helped me draft what he called a truth document, a carefully worded account of my mother's behavior backed by screenshots and testimony from family members who had witnessed incidents over the years. It wasn't emotional or accusatory, just factual, a timeline of events with evidence attached. We kept it clinical, professional, impossible to dismiss as hysteria or overreaction. Meanwhile, I continued normal wedding planning with Emma, choosing flowers and finalizing the menu and sending out save the dates. To anyone watching, I was a happy bride-to-be, excited about her upcoming marriage. Only a few people knew about the folder growing on my computer, the document that would eventually detonate like a bomb in the middle of my mother's carefully constructed world. Mom continued her campaign of concern, calling family members and forwarding articles about age gap relationships and sending me texts that oscillated between worried and passive-aggressive. She suggested I see a therapist to work through whatever is making me push her away. She told my grandmother that she was losing sleep worrying about me. She posted on Facebook about how hard it was to watch your child make decisions you don't agree with, collecting sympathy from friends who had no idea what was really happening. Each action was another entry in my documentation. Each lie was another piece of evidence. She was building my case for me, one manipulative move at a time. 3 months before the wedding, Mom made her boldest move yet. She contacted Marcus directly, asking to meet him for coffee without me present. He agreed after confirming with me that it was okay, and recorded the entire conversation on his phone with her knowledge. She had insisted they put phones away, but he kept his recording app running in his pocket. She spent an hour trying to convince him to break up with me. "I'm only telling you this because I care about Olivia," she said, her voice smooth and concerned on the recording Marcus played for me later. "But she has some mental health issues that you should know about. Depression, anxiety, a tendency to create drama when things are going well. She's been in therapy for years." None of that was true. I had never been diagnosed with depression or anxiety, had never been in therapy before recently starting sessions to deal with her abuse. "She fixates on relationships as a way to escape her problems," Mom continued. "And I'm worried that she's using you as a band-aid for deeper issues. You seem like a good man, Marcus. Too good to be trapped in a marriage with someone who isn't mentally stable." The recording made me physically ill. This wasn't just concern or disagreement. This was character assassination. She was literally lying about my mental health to try to destroy my relationship. And she was doing it with such smooth confidence, such practiced sincerity, that if Marcus hadn't known the truth, he might have believed her. "That's when I knew we had to go nuclear," Marcus said after we finished listening. "This isn't just about you and her anymore. She's actively trying to destroy your reputation, your relationship, your future. We can't let her win." David helped us craft our response strategy. We would wait until right before the wedding when everyone was assembled, when Mom would be performing her role as mother of the bride, basking in attention and sympathy. That's when we would release the truth document to key family members, with copies of everything: texts, recordings, testimony from relatives and friends. We would expose her, not in some private confrontation she could spin later, but publicly, irrefutably, with evidence she couldn't deny. "The wedding will be her last performance," David said, "and you'll be controlling the final act." The thought should have made me anxious, but instead, I felt calm, focused, powerful in a way I had never experienced before. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to my mother's cruelty. I was planning my response, gathering my resources, preparing to fight back with precision and purpose. Mom remained oblivious to what was coming. She continued her campaign of concern, her strategic undermining, her careful construction of a narrative where she was the victim and I was the troubled daughter making a terrible mistake. She had no idea that every text she sent, every lie she told, every manipulation she attempted was being documented, archived, and prepared for public consumption. 2 months before the wedding, I received an email from her with the subject line, "A Mother's Final Plea." Inside was a long letter detailing all her concerns about my marriage, written as if she had tried everything to reach me, and this was her last desperate attempt. It was clearly meant to be forwarded to other people, designed to show how hard she had tried to save me before I made my terrible mistake. I added it to the documentation folder with something close to satisfaction. She was making this so easy, building the evidence against herself with every desperate move to control the situation. "She's panicking," Marcus observed when I showed him the email. "She can tell she's losing control of you and she's escalating." "Good," I said. Let her panic. Let her escalate. It just gives us more ammunition. Emma was worried about the emotional toll all this planning was taking on me, but honestly, I had never felt clearer or stronger. The documentation gave me power. The planning gave me purpose. And the knowledge that justice was coming gave me peace. I wasn't the problem daughter Mom had always told me I was. I was the architect of my own liberation. The final piece fell into place 6 weeks before the wedding. My Aunt Patricia, the one who had warned me about Mom's campaign, offered to help in a way I hadn't expected. "I kept letters," she said during a phone call, "from when your mom tried to destroy my relationship with Robert. Letters she wrote to other family members, full of lies and manipulation. I kept them because I knew someday someone would need proof that this is a pattern, not an isolated incident." "Do you want them?" "Yes," I said immediately. "I absolutely want them." The letters arrived 3 days later, carefully preserved in a manila folder with Patricia's notes about context and timeline. Reading them was like looking into a mirror that reflected 20 years into the past. The same tactics, the same lies, the same calculated campaign to isolate and control. Mom had done this before, successfully, driving a wedge between Patricia and the rest of the family that lasted years. She wouldn't do it again, not to me. With Patricia's evidence added to my own, the truth document was complete. A comprehensive, irrefutable account of Gloria Castellanos' pattern of emotional abuse and manipulation spanning decades. It was 47 pages long, including screenshots, testimony, and historical evidence. David had helped me format it professionally with a table of contents and footnotes and appendices. It looked less like an accusation and more like a legal brief, which was exactly the effect we wanted. "This is bulletproof," David said when we finished the final draft. "She can't spin her way out of this. The evidence is too strong, the pattern too clear." 1 month before the wedding, I sent my mother a text. "I'd like you to participate in the ceremony after all. Will you do a reading during the service?" Her response came back within minutes, effusive and emotional. "I would be honored, sweetheart. I'm so glad you're letting me be part of your special day. I love you so much." I stared at those words, "I love you so much," and felt nothing. The manipulation was so transparent now, so obvious. She thought she had won, that I had finally broken and was letting her back in. She had no idea what was really coming. "You're giving her a reading?" Marcus asked when I told him. "No," I said with a smile that felt dangerous and right. "I'm giving her a stage, right before I pull the curtain back and show everyone who's really been performing." The final month before the wedding passed in a strange duality. On the surface, I was the picture of a happy bride, attending cake tastings, finalizing seating charts, having my final dress fitting. My mother interpreted my renewed communication as capitulation, proof that her campaign of concern had finally worked. She attended the shower Emma threw for me, played the role of doting mother perfectly, even gave a touching speech about watching me grow up. "I just want my daughter to be happy," she said to the assembled guests, dabbing at perfectly dry eyes. "That's all any mother wants." I smiled and thanked her, while Emma sat beside me squeezing my hand so hard it hurt, both of us knowing what was coming. The truth document sat in my laptop, password protected and backed up in 3 locations. David had helped me identify exactly who would receive copies and when. The timing was crucial. Too early, and Mom would have time to spin a counter-narrative. Too late, and the impact would be diminished. We settled on the rehearsal dinner, the night before the wedding, when family would be assembled, but the actual ceremony wouldn't yet be at risk. Marcus's family flew in throughout that final week. His mother, Carol, his sister, Jennifer, with her husband and 2 kids, his uncle, Tom, and Aunt Marie. They were warm and welcoming, treating me like family immediately. The contrast with my own family, where love came with conditions and strings attached, was stark. During a particularly chaotic dinner at our apartment where Marcus's niece spilled juice and his nephew loudly explained the plot of his favorite video game, Carol pulled me aside. "I just want you to know how happy we are that you're joining our family," she said. "Marcus hasn't been this joyful in years. You're good for him and he's good for you. That's what matters." Simple words, True words. Everything my own mother had never been able to say. 2 nights before the wedding, I lay awake next to Marcus going over every detail of the plan. The rehearsal dinner would be held at a private room in a nice restaurant in River North. 60 people would attend, both families, the wedding party, and close friends. After dinner, before dessert, I would stand to make a toast. That's when I would hand out copies of the truth document to key family members, starting with my grandmother and my uncles, working outward from there. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked in the darkness. "Once you do this, there's no going back." "I've never been more sure of anything. Your relationship with your mother is already destroyed," I finished. "Has been for years, probably forever. I'm just making it official, and I'm making sure that when it ends, everyone knows why." The rehearsal itself went smoothly. We walked through the ceremony at the Botanic Garden greenhouse, the space transformed with early spring flowers and soft lighting. My mother stood in the front row with my father, who had been mostly silent throughout this entire ordeal, either genuinely oblivious to his wife's behavior or willfully blind to it. When the wedding coordinator asked about the mother-daughter dance at the reception, Mom smiled and squeezed my hand. "I can't wait," she said. "I've been practicing." The lie was so casual, so automatic. She had been telling everyone I was making a mistake, trying to sabotage my relationship, and lying about my mental health. But here, in public, she performed maternal devotion flawlessly. The performance would end tonight. We arrived at the restaurant and were shown to the private room. The space was elegant with exposed brick walls and soft lighting. Round tables were set up with flowers and candles, and a small head table had been arranged for Marcus and me with our parents on either side. My mother settled into her seat next to me, chatting pleasantly about the wedding venue and how beautiful everything would be. Dinner was served and conversation flowed. Marcus's family told embarrassing stories about him as a child. Emma made everyone laugh with an account of our college adventures. My mother contributed a story about me in elementary school, carefully edited to make her sound supportive, while subtly suggesting I had always been awkward and uncertain. The undermining was so practiced, so subtle, that most people probably didn't notice it. But I did. I always had. After the main course was cleared, I stood with my wine glass, signaling that I wanted to make a toast. The room quieted, all eyes turning to me. Marcus looked up at me with love and a hint of apprehension, knowing what was about to happen. "First, thank you all for being here," I began, my voice steady. "Your presence means the world to us, and we're so grateful to have you here to celebrate our marriage." I paused, letting my gaze move around the room, landing briefly on each face. Marriage is about partnership, about choosing to build a life with someone who sees you clearly and loves you anyway. It's about trust and honesty and feeling safe enough to be your authentic self. My mother smiled up at me, probably thinking this was leading to some emotional tribute to her. "Growing up, I learned a lot about relationships from watching the people around me," I continued. "I learned what love looks like, but I also learned what manipulation looks like, what control looks like, what abuse disguised as concern looks like." The smile on my mother's face began to falter. People shifted in their seats, confused about where this toast was going. I learned that some people will say they love you while systematically undermining your confidence, your choices, your worth as a person. They'll do it privately while performing devotion publicly. They'll rewrite history to make themselves the hero and you the problem. And they'll do it so skillfully that you'll question your own perception of reality. Emma had stood up and was now moving through the room with a stack of documents, handing them to my grandmother, my uncles, my cousins. The truth document, 47 pages of evidence, was being distributed while I spoke. "What you're receiving right now is documentation of emotional abuse that has spanned my entire life," I said. "Text messages, recordings, testimony from family members, historical evidence of patterns that go back decades. I'm sharing this not to humiliate anyone, but because I refuse to let lies become the official story. I refuse to be gaslit into believing that concern and love look like control and cruelty." My mother's face had gone white. She reached for the document Emma placed in front of her, her hands shaking. My father picked up his copy, confusion written across his face. Mom, you spent months trying to destroy my relationship with Marcus. You lied about me to our family. You contacted my fiancé privately to tell him I was mentally unstable. You've been conducting a campaign to ensure that when I finally stood up to you, everyone would think I was the problem. My voice remained calm, factual. But I documented everything. Every text, every call, every lie. And now everyone here has access to the same truth. Marcus's hand found mine, squeezing gently. His mother Carol looked shocked, but not surprised. She had heard enough stories to understand. So, my toast is this. I raised my glass higher. To truth, to breaking cycles of abuse, to choosing authentic love over performed devotion, to building families based on respect rather than control, and to everyone in this room who has shown me what real support looks like. Thank you for helping me understand that I deserve better than what I was taught to accept. A few people raised their glasses hesitantly, unsure how to respond. Most were frantically flipping through the documents, their expressions changing as they read. Shock, anger, recognition. My grandmother had tears streaming down her face as she read the text where my mother had called me stupid and naive. My uncle's jaw was tight with fury as he reached the section detailing the lies she had told about Marcus. My mother stood abruptly, the document falling from her hands. This is ridiculous. She's twisted everything, taken things out of context. There are screenshots, Mom, recordings, testimony from multiple witnesses. Everything is dated and verified. There's no context that makes he's settling for you because women his age wouldn't want him. Sound like maternal love. She looked around the room frantically, searching for allies, but people were still reading, their faces growing harder as they progressed through the evidence. The performance had ended. The curtain had been pulled back, and there was nowhere for her to hide. You've always been so sensitive, she tried, her voice taking on that familiar, concerned tone. So quick to misunderstand. Patricia, I called across the room. My aunt stood, holding her own set of documents. Would you share what you brought? Patricia's voice was steady and clear. Letters Gloria wrote about me and my husband 20 years ago. The same tactics, the same lies. She tried to destroy my marriage too, and she almost succeeded. Olivia asked me to share these because they show this is a pattern, not a one-time misunderstanding. My mother's last defense crumbled. People were looking at her not with sympathy, but with dawning recognition, remembering their own interactions with her. Small incidents that suddenly made sense in the context of systematic manipulation. I was trying to protect you, Mom said, turning back to me, her voice desperate now. Everything I did was because I love you. No, I said firmly. Everything you did was because you needed to control me. There's a difference. Love doesn't look like abuse. Concern doesn't look like sabotage. And protecting someone doesn't mean destroying them when they choose a path you don't approve of. Marcus stood beside me, his arm around my waist. Mrs. Castellanos, I think you should leave now. This is my daughter's rehearsal dinner. Actually, Emma interjected coldly, this is Liv and Marcus's rehearsal dinner, and they're asking you to go. My father finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Gloria, we should leave. He had been reading the documents, his face growing grayer with each page. We need to talk. Don't you see what she's doing? Mom appealed to him. She's turning everyone against me. You turned everyone against you, he said quietly. I read the texts, Gloria. I heard the recording of your conversation with Marcus. This isn't Olivia twisting things. This is you, in your own words. The fight went out of her then. She looked around the room one last time, searching for someone who would defend her, but found only people she had manipulated or lied about reading evidence of her betrayals. She grabbed her purse and rushed toward the exit, my father following with slumped shoulders. The door closed behind them, and the room remained silent for a long moment. Then my grandmother spoke, her voice thick with emotion. Olivia, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I should have seen this. All those years, I should have protected you. I didn't make it easy to see, I said gently. She was very good at hiding it. No more, my Uncle James said firmly, standing up with the document in his hand. This ends now. As far as I'm concerned, Gloria is no longer welcome at family events until she gets serious help and makes genuine amends. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. My cousins came over to hug me, apologizing for not seeing the truth sooner. Marcus's family embraced me, Carol whispering that she was proud of my courage. Emma held me tight, tears streaming down her face. The rehearsal dinner didn't end in celebration, but it ended in truth, and truth felt like a release I hadn't known I needed. People stayed for hours, talking about their own experiences with my mother, sharing stories that revealed years of small manipulations they had dismissed or ignored. The collective testimony was damning, painting a picture of a woman who needed control more than she needed genuine connection. That night, back at our apartment, Marcus and I sat on our balcony looking out at the Chicago skyline. I felt hollowed out but clean, like a wound that had finally been drained of infection. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," I said, and realized it was true. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. My phone buzzed, a text from my father. "Your mother and I are staying at a hotel tonight. I've read everything multiple times. I don't know how I missed this. I'm so sorry, Olivia. I won't be at the wedding tomorrow. This is your day, and you deserve to have it without any drama. But I love you, and I'm proud of you." The message was imperfect. He had stood by and let this happen for years, but it was something, an acknowledgement, a start. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect May morning that feels like a gift. Emma arrived early to help me get ready, both of us deliberately not discussing the absence of my mother. My grandmother and aunts came by to help with final preparations, and Carol insisted on doing my hair herself, a traditional gesture that made me cry. "Your family now," she said simply, weaving flowers into the updo. "And family takes care of each other." The ceremony itself was everything I had dreamed of. The greenhouse was filled with spring blooms, sunlight filtering through glass panels and casting everything in a warm glow. Marcus waited at the altar in his navy suit, his face transforming with joy when he saw me walking down the aisle on my grandmother's arm. She had volunteered when she learned my father wouldn't be there. We had rewritten the vows to remove any mention of parents or family traditions. Instead, we focused on what we were choosing to build together. A partnership based on honesty, respect, and genuine love. When Marcus slipped the ring on my finger, I felt the weight of my mother's expectations and manipulations finally lift away completely. The reception was joyful in a way I hadn't thought possible 24 hours ago. People danced and laughed and celebrated without the undercurrent of tension that my mother's presence would have created. Several family members approached me throughout the night to apologize for not seeing the truth sooner, and I accepted their apologies gracefully while making it clear that the responsibility had always been my mother's, not theirs. My phone stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no dramatic gestures. My mother had been exposed, and she had chosen silence rather than accountability. Part of me had expected some final manipulation, some desperate attempt to regain control or play the victim. But there was nothing. Just absence where toxic presence had always been. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Portugal, a trip Marcus had planned with meticulous care. We spent our days exploring Lisbon's tile-covered buildings and seaside cliffs, eating fresh seafood and pastel de nata, sleeping late and staying up to watch sunsets. For the first time in my adult life, I went days without thinking about my mother, without anticipating her next criticism or manipulation. The freedom was intoxicating. On our 4th day, while we were having breakfast at a cafe overlooking the Tagus River, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Olivia, this is Dr. Sarah Brennan. I'm a therapist your mother started seeing 3 days ago." My stomach tightened. "I'm on my honeymoon. I'm not calling to advocate for your mother," Dr. Brennan interrupted gently. "I'm calling because I believe you deserve to know that she's been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. She showed me the documents you distributed. All of them." I set down my coffee, the picturesque view suddenly less important. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because part of my work with her will involve her understanding the harm she's caused. And I want you to know that you're not obligated to participate in her recovery in any way. Your boundaries are valid, and maintaining distance is a completely appropriate response to her behavior. The validation from a mental health professional I had never met meant more than it probably should have. Does she understand what she did? She's at the very beginning of that process. Right now, she's still in partial denial, still trying to justify her actions. It will take a long time, if it happens at all. Narcissistic personality disorder is one of the most difficult conditions to treat because it requires the patient to fundamentally question their self-perception. I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for an apology. That's probably wise. I just wanted you to know that she is getting help, and to reiterate that you owe her nothing. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not even acknowledgement. Your healing comes first. After we hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time. Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. You okay? My mother's in therapy. She's been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. How do you feel about that? Relieved? Vindicated? Also kind of sad, which is stupid because she doesn't deserve my sadness. It's not stupid. She's still your mother even if she's a terrible one. You're allowed to have complicated feelings. The diagnosis explained so much. The need for control, the inability to handle my independence, the elaborate public persona hiding private cruelty. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it gave it context, transformed it from personal failing to clinical condition. Knowing didn't make me want to forgive her, but it did make me feel less guilty about not forgiving her. We spent the rest of the honeymoon deliberately not thinking about my mother or the fallout from the rehearsal dinner. Emma sent occasional updates. My father had moved into a temporary apartment and was considering divorce. Several family members had cut contact with my mother entirely, and the documents had been shared widely enough that Mom's reputation in our extended family was essentially destroyed. Your Aunt Patricia says your mom tried to show up at her house demanding that everyone stop listening to lies, Emma texted. Patricia told her to leave or she'd call the police. She left. The image of my mother, stripped of her power and influence, desperately trying to regain control that was permanently lost, should have made me feel guilty. Instead, I felt only a quiet satisfaction. This was justice, not revenge. She was experiencing natural consequences for her actions, losing relationships and respect because of her own choices. When we returned to Chicago, real life reasserted itself quickly. There were thank you notes to write, wedding gifts to organize, and a subtle shift in how my extended family interacted with me. People who had been distant or awkward around me for years suddenly wanted to have coffee, to apologize, to explain that they hadn't understood what was really happening. I accepted these overtures cautiously, building new relationships without the shadow of my mother's manipulation hanging over them. My father reached out a month after the wedding, asking if we could meet for lunch. I agreed, choosing a neutral public location, still uncertain about his role in everything that had happened. He looked older when he walked into the restaurant, more tired, the weight of whatever realizations he'd had showing in the lines around his eyes. I owe you an apology, he said before we even ordered. I should have protected you. I did see things over the years, moments when your mother's behavior seemed off or cruel, but I told myself I was misinterpreting, that she knew best about parenting, that it wasn't my place to interfere. You did more than not interfere, Dad. You enabled her. You backed up her narratives, even when they were lies. He nodded, looking down at his hands. I know. I've spent the last month in therapy trying to understand why I was so passive, why I let her treat you that way. Turns out I have my own issues with confrontation and conflict avoidance that I need to work on. Are you getting divorced? We're separated. Whether it becomes divorce depends on whether she does the work her therapist is recommending. Right now, she's still blaming you for turning everyone against her. Until she can acknowledge her own responsibility, I don't see how we move forward. We talked for 2 hours, a more honest conversation than we'd had in years. He asked about my life, my work, my marriage, without the filter of my mother's opinions shaping his responses. He admitted he had been proud of my accomplishments all along, but had suppressed showing it because it would have contradicted Mom's narrative. He had been as controlled by her as I had, just in different ways. I didn't forgive him completely. That would take time, but I understood him better. And I appreciated that he was taking responsibility and actively working to change rather than making excuses. Work became my anchor during this transition period. I had been promoted to senior marketing director shortly before the wedding, and the new position demanded enough attention that I couldn't spend all day processing family drama. My colleagues knew something major had happened. Emma had explained the basics after I returned from the honeymoon, but they were respectfully low-key about it. People just treated me normally, which was exactly what I needed. 3 months after the wedding, my mother's therapist called again. Dr. Brennan's voice was professional, but there was an underlying note of frustration. Your mother has requested that I facilitate a meeting between the two of you. She says she wants to apologize and make amends. No. I told her you would likely say that. Would you be willing to hear her apology via letter, with the understanding that you're under no obligation to respond? I considered this. Part of me wanted to slam the door completely, to have nothing to do with her recovery process. But another part, smaller and more curious, wanted to see if she was actually capable of real accountability. One letter. If it's manipulative or tries to shift blame, I won't read anything else. That's fair. I'll work with her on drafting something genuine. The letter arrived 2 weeks later. It was handwritten, 3 pages long, and began with 2 simple words. I'm sorry. She took responsibility for specific incidents. The text about Marcus settling for me, the campaign to turn family against him, the lies about my mental health. She acknowledged that her behavior had been abusive, that she had caused real harm, and that her actions had stemmed from her own deep-seated need for control rather than any actual concern for my well-being. I created a narrative where you were always the problem so that I could feel like the hero, she wrote. I see now that I was threatened by your independence, your happiness, your ability to build a life that didn't revolve around seeking my approval. Instead of celebrating you, I tried to diminish you. Instead of supporting you, I sabotaged you. I have no excuses. I was wrong. The letter went on to detail the work she was doing in therapy, the patterns she was beginning to recognize, the ways her own childhood trauma had manifested in how she parented. She didn't ask for forgiveness or reconciliation. She just acknowledged the harm and took ownership of it. I read the letter 3 times, looking for the manipulation, the subtle blame shifting, the performance. But it seemed genuine, or as genuine as someone with narcissistic personality disorder could manage. Whether this represented real change or just a sophisticated new approach to control remained to be seen. I didn't respond to the letter, but I also didn't throw it away. I filed it in a folder with all the other documentation, evidence of both the harm and the attempted accountability. Maybe someday it would matter, maybe it wouldn't. Either way, my healing didn't depend on her recovery. 6 months after the wedding, Marcus and I found out I was pregnant. The news brought joy and terror in equal measure. I was going to be a mother, which meant confronting every complicated feeling I had about motherhood and family, and the cycle of hurt that could so easily continue. What if I'm like her? I asked Marcus one night, my hands on my still flat stomach. What if I hurt our kid the way she hurt me? You won't, he said firmly. Because you see what she did wrong. Because you've done the work to heal from it. Because you'll choose differently every single day. I started seeing my own therapist, someone who specialized in intergenerational trauma and breaking cycles of abuse. Dr. Martinez was practical and kind, helping me process not just what my mother had done, but how to ensure I didn't replicate those patterns. Awareness is your biggest advantage, she told me. You know what emotional abuse looks like. You know the difference between loving guidance and manipulative control. That knowledge will protect your child in ways you were never protected. When I was 4 months pregnant, my father asked if he could be involved as a grandfather. We met for coffee, and I laid out explicit boundaries. He could be part of our child's life, but my mother could not. At least not until there was substantial evidence of sustained change and explicit agreement from me. He would never undermine my parenting decisions or share information about my child with my mother. He would respect that I was the parent and had final say in all matters involving my child. He agreed to all of it, tears in his eyes. I won't fail this grandchild the way I failed you, I promise. My mother learned about the pregnancy through my grandmother. She sent a gift, a beautiful antique baby blanket with a card that read only, "Congratulations." No demands for access, no emotional manipulation, no victim narrative. Just acknowledgement and appropriate distance. She's still in therapy, my grandmother reported. Going twice a week. Your father says she's different, calmer, less reactive. But she understands she's not welcome in your life unless and until you choose to let her back in. I put the blanket away in a closet, unable to use it, but also unable to throw it away. Maybe it represented hope, or maybe it was just another item in the complicated archive of my relationship with my mother. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Marcus was attentive and excited, reading parenting books and taking childbirth classes with enthusiasm. His mother flew in for a week when I was 7 months along, bringing home-cooked meals and helping us set up the nursery. The contrast between her easy, genuine affection and my mother's conditional love was still jarring, still painful, but increasingly it just made me grateful for what I had, rather than bitter about what I'd missed. Emma threw me a baby shower where my chosen family, friends from work, college, my support network, gathered to celebrate. My cousins came, my aunts, my grandmother. My father attended, bringing a handmade rocking chair he'd built himself, a skill I hadn't known he possessed. The absence of my mother was noted but not mourned. We had all adjusted to a new normal where she simply wasn't part of things. Our daughter arrived on a cold January morning, 3 weeks early and in a rush. Eleanor Rose Fletcher Castellanos, named after Marcus's grandmother and mine, both strong women who had shown us what love could look like when it wasn't conditional. She was perfect. 7 pounds 2 ounces with dark hair and my nose and Marcus's deep blue eyes. Holding her for the first time, I felt every complicated feeling about motherhood crystallize into one simple truth. I would never make her feel the way my mother had made me feel. I would never use love as a weapon or affection as a tool for control. I would never criticize her into conformity or undermine her confidence. She would know, every single day, that she was enough exactly as she was. My father visited in the hospital, his face transforming when he saw his granddaughter. "She's beautiful," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Absolutely beautiful." He held Eleanor with practiced ease, and I realized he had probably been a good father once, before he surrendered his authority to my mother's control. "I'm going to be a better grandfather than I was a father," he said quietly. "I promise you that." We didn't tell my mother about Eleanor's birth immediately. I wanted those first few weeks to be pure and uncomplicated, focused on learning to care for this tiny human, without the anxiety of wondering when my mother would try to insert herself into the situation. Marcus supported this completely, running interference with well-meaning relatives who asked if we should let Mom know. "When Liv is ready," he would say firmly, "this is her decision." Eleanor was 6 weeks old when my mother's therapist called again. Dr. Brennan's voice was carefully neutral. "I'm calling to let you know that your mother has requested permission to send a gift for your daughter. She understands she's not welcome to meet Eleanor, but she wanted to acknowledge her birth in some way. She asked me to reach out first to see if you would accept the gesture." I thought about this for a long time. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain the complete separation that had brought me so much peace. But another part, the part that was learning about complicated motherhood in real time, recognized that my mother's attempt to respect boundaries was significant, even if it was mediated by her therapist. "She can send one gift," I said finally. "But nothing with strings attached. No requests for photos or updates or visits. Just the gift with maybe a card. That's all." The package arrived a week later. Inside was a handmade quilt, clearly created over many hours, each square featuring a different children's book illustration hand-embroidered in exquisite detail. The card was brief. "For Eleanor, every child deserves to grow up surrounded by stories and love. G." The quilt was objectively beautiful. I spread it out on our bed and examined each square, where the wild things are, the giving tree, goodnight moon, dozens of classics rendered in careful stitches. This had taken months to make, which meant my mother had known about the pregnancy far longer than I'd realized and had been working on this gift in silence, respecting my need for space while still marking the occasion. "What are you going to do with it?" Marcus asked, finding me staring at the quilt. I think I'm going to use it. Not because I forgive her or because this fixes anything, but because Eleanor deserves beautiful things, and this is a beautiful thing. I can separate the art from the artist. We put the quilt in Eleanor's nursery. draping it over the rocking chair my father had made. Two grandparents, both trying to do better, both attempting to show love in the ways they were capable of. It didn't erase the past, but it acknowledged a possible different future. Motherhood changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Every milestone Eleanor reached, every first, I found myself thinking about what my mother had experienced at the same stage. Had she held me with this same fierce protectiveness? Had she marveled at my tiny fingers and perfect ears? At what point had her love become conditional, twisted by her own unexamined trauma, into something that looked like care but felt like control? Dr. Martinez helped me process these questions during our ongoing sessions. You can hold two truths simultaneously, she explained. Your mother probably did love you in her limited way, and she also abused you. Those things can both be true. Understanding her limitations doesn't require you to forgive the harm. When Eleanor was 4 months old, I received a letter from my mother, the first direct communication in over a year. It was different from the earlier apology letter, less formal, more vulnerable. I'm writing not to ask for anything, but to tell you that I watch you sometimes from a distance. At the park near your house, at the coffee shop you like. I don't approach or make my presence known. I stay far enough away that you wouldn't notice. I just want to see you being happy, being a mother, being the person you were meant to be without my interference. I know this might sound creepy, and if it makes you uncomfortable, I'll stop. But seeing you with your daughter, the way you hold her and smile at her and exist so fully in your joy, has taught me more about my failures than a year of therapy could. You love her the way I should have loved you, without conditions or control. And watching that has broken something in me that needed to be broken. The letter unsettled me deeply. The image of my mother watching from a distance, observing my life like an anthropologist studying an unfamiliar culture, was both sad and disturbing. But it was also honest in a way she had never been before, acknowledging her limitations and my success without trying to insert herself into it. I showed the letter to Dr. Martinez during our next session. How does it make you feel? She asked. Uncomfortable, sad, also kind of angry that she's in spaces where I thought I was safe from her observation. Do you want to maintain the complete separation? I thought about this carefully. No, I think I want to meet with her. Once. With you present, in your office, with explicit boundaries. I want to see if the change is real or if this is just a more sophisticated manipulation. Dr. Martinez arranged the meeting for 2 weeks later. I spent those days rehearsing what I would say, preparing for every possible version of my mother who might show up, the genuinely changed woman doing real work, or the narcissist who had simply learned to perform recovery more convincingly. The day of the meeting, Marcus watched Eleanor while I drove to Dr. Martinez's office. My hands were shaking as I walked in, and I felt 14 years old again, small and vulnerable and hoping desperately for approval I knew I shouldn't need. My mother was already there, sitting in one of Dr. Martinez's comfortable chairs. She looked different, older somehow, without the perfectly styled hair and designer clothes that had always been her armor. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, barely any makeup. When she saw me, she didn't stand or reach for a hug. She just nodded slightly, respecting my space. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. We sat in silence for a moment while Dr. Martinez established the ground rules. Either of us could end the session at any time. There would be no physical contact unless I initiated it. My mother could not ask questions about Eleanor or my life. This was purely for her to communicate what she needed to say. My mother took a deep breath. "I've spent the last 14 months in intensive therapy trying to understand why I treated you the way I did. What I've learned is that I was repeating patterns from my own childhood. My mother was emotionally abusive too, and I never processed that trauma. Instead, I internalized her voice and became it, inflicting on you what had been inflicted on me. Understanding why doesn't excuse what," I said firmly. "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I'm just trying to explain because you deserve to understand that this was never about you. You were always enough, always worthy, always deserving of unconditional love. My inability to provide that was my failing, not your inadequacy. You told Marcus I was mentally unstable. You tried to destroy my marriage before it began. You spent 28 years systematically undermining my confidence and self-worth." "I did all of that," she acknowledged, her voice breaking. And I can't take any of it back. I can only promise that I understand now what I couldn't understand then. That you are remarkable exactly as you are. That Marcus is lucky to have you. That the life you've built is beautiful and strong and everything I was too broken to help you create. I felt tears on my face and was angry at myself for crying. Why now? Why did it take me cutting you out completely for you to finally do this work? Because I lost everything. My daughter, my granddaughter, my family, my reputation. I was forced to look at myself without the protective narrative I'd built, and what I saw was someone I didn't want to be. Therapy wasn't a choice I made to get you back. It was survival, the only way I could live with what I'd become. We talked for nearly 2 hours. My mother took responsibility for specific incidents, explaining her thought process without making excuses. She acknowledged the harm each action had caused and the patterns they represented. She described her ongoing therapy work, the daily practice of catching narcissistic thoughts and choosing different responses. I'm not cured, she said. Narcissistic personality disorder doesn't work that way. But I'm managing it, learning to recognize my destructive patterns and interrupt them. I'm learning what real love looks like, even though I'm probably never going to be capable of providing it in a fully healthy way. So what do you want from me? I asked finally. Nothing, she said, and I believed her. I don't expect reconciliation or a relationship with Eleanor or even regular contact. I just wanted you to know that I see you now, really see you, and I'm sorry for every year I didn't. As I drove home, I felt hollowed out but somehow lighter. The meeting hadn't magically healed anything, but it had provided something I hadn't known I needed. Explicit acknowledgement of reality. My mother admitting that she had been wrong, that I had been right, that the problem had always been her narcissism rather than my inadequacy. That night, I held Eleanor and whispered promises into her tiny ear. I will never make you doubt your worth. I will never use my love as a tool for control. I will never criticize you into conformity. You are perfect exactly as you are, and I will spend every day making sure you know that. Marcus found us like that and wrapped us both in his arms. How did it go? She apologized, really apologized, without conditions or deflection. Does that change anything? No, but it feels like closure. Like I can finally stop waiting for her to become someone she was never capable of being. Over the following months, my mother and I maintained careful distance with occasional supervised contact mediated by Dr. Martinez. She sent cards for holidays, always brief and appropriate. She asked permission before sending gifts and respected it when I said no. She didn't try to force herself into my life or demand access to Eleanor. The change felt real, though I remained cautiously guarded. Trust broken so completely didn't rebuild quickly, if it rebuilt at all. But seeing her take responsibility, watching her do genuine work on herself without expectation of reward, allowed something in me to soften slightly. My father had fully reintegrated into our lives by then. He came over weekly to help with Eleanor, fixed things around our house, attended family dinners. The relationship was still complicated, still marked by years of his complicity in my mother's abuse, but it was functional and improving. He had divorced my mother 6 months after her diagnosis, unable to continue a marriage where he had enabled so much harm. I should have protected you, he said during one visit, watching me feed Eleanor. Every day I live with that failure. All I can do now is try to be better. You are better, I acknowledged. That's what matters. 2 years passed. Eleanor grew from an infant into a toddler with strong opinions and Marcus's laugh. We bought a house in Oak Park with a yard and good schools. My career flourished. I had been promoted to VP of marketing and was building a team I was proud of. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm of work and parenting and marriage, the kind of ordinary happiness I had never imagined possible during those years under my mother's control. My mother remained on the periphery, present but distant. She sent cards for Eleanor's birthdays, always age-appropriate and never demanding. She continued therapy consistently, and according to my father, who maintained minimal contact with her, she had built a quieter life focused on managing her condition rather than controlling others. I saw her once more, when Eleanor was 18 months old. Dr. Martinez mediated again, and this time I brought photos to share, a peace offering of sorts. My mother looked at each one with tears streaming down her face, but she didn't ask to keep any. She just looked and thanked me for sharing them and acknowledged that this was more than she deserved. "She's beautiful," Mom whispered. "Just like you were. I'm glad she has a mother who knows how to love her properly." It was the closest thing to redemption our relationship would probably ever achieve. Acknowledgement, distance, and the fragile possibility of something different in the future. The real victory came on ordinary days, when Eleanor fell and scraped her knee, and I comforted her without criticizing how she'd been running too fast. When she drew pictures that were objectively scribbles, but I praised her creativity without comparison to other children. When she insisted on wearing mismatched clothes and I let her, celebrating her emerging independence rather than forcing conformity. Every choice I made as a parent was a deliberate rejection of my mother's patterns. Every moment of unconditional love was a rebellion against the conditional love I had received. And every day Eleanor grew more confident, more secure, more certain of her worth, was evidence that cycles could be broken, that damage didn't have to define us, that we could choose to love differently than we were loved. Marcus watched me navigate motherhood with Eleanor and regularly told me how proud he was. "You're breaking generational trauma in real time," he said one evening after I'd spent an hour building block towers with Eleanor just to knock them down and hear her delighted squeals. "You're choosing differently every single day." "It's easier than I thought it would be," I admitted, "because I know exactly what not to do. I have a 28-year manual on how to damage a child, so I just do the opposite." Emma came over one afternoon when Eleanor was napping, bringing coffee and her own tales of dating disasters. She had been my constant through everything, the sister I chose when the one I was born with proved unreliable. "I'm proud of you, you know," she said out of nowhere. "For surviving your mom, for building this incredible life, for being brave enough to blow everything up rather than live with her abuse." "I'm proud of me too," I said, and meant it. I used to think standing up to her made me a bad daughter. Now I know it made me a strong woman. My grandmother passed away that spring, peacefully in her sleep at 89. At the funeral, my mother kept her distance, sitting in the back while I delivered the eulogy. Afterward, she approached carefully, maintaining several feet of space. "That was beautiful," she said quietly. "Your grandmother loved you so much, more than I was capable of showing." "She did," I agreed. "Thank you for respecting boundaries today." "I always will," she promised, and walked away without trying to extend the interaction. My father had remarried by then, a kind woman named Susan who worked as a librarian and treated Eleanor with genuine affection. They had bought a house near us and were regular fixtures in our lives, healthy grandparents who showed up consistently without drama. "I got lucky the second time," Dad told me once. "Susan is teaching me what real partnership looks like. I just wish I'd learned it soon enough to be a better husband to your mother, a better father to you." "You're being a good grandfather now," I said. "That's what Eleanor will remember." The third anniversary of distributing the truth document came and went without fanfare. The action that had once felt so dramatic now seemed like just a necessary step in a longer journey toward healing. Family members had adjusted to the new reality, where my mother was excluded from gatherings. Some maintained limited contact with her, others had cut her out completely. But everyone understood and respected that she was not welcome in my life or my daughter's life without explicit invitation. She never asked for that invitation, and I respected her restraint, even as I remained uncertain whether I would ever be ready to extend it. My work began including speaking engagements about breaking corporate hierarchies and empowering teams, and I found that the skills I had learned in standing up to my mother translated well to professional confidence. I wasn't afraid to challenge bad ideas or defend my team or set firm boundaries. The little girl who had learned to shrink herself to avoid criticism had become a woman who took up space unapologetically. On Eleanor's third birthday, we threw a party in our backyard with bouncy castles and face painting and all her little friends from preschool. Watching her run around with frosting smeared on her face, completely secure in being loved and celebrated, I felt a profound sense of completion. This was what I had been fighting for. The chance to give my daughter what I had never had. Marcus found me watching from the deck and wrapped his arms around me from behind. "What are you thinking about?" "How different everything is. How happy I am. How grateful I am that I finally stood up to her." "Best decision you ever made." "Well, second best." he kissed my temple. Marrying me was obviously the first. I laughed and turned to kiss him properly. Definitely second best. That evening, after Eleanor was in bed and the party cleanup was complete, I found myself thinking about the person I had been 3 years ago. Desperate for approval, tolerating abuse because I didn't know I deserved better, believing my mother's narrative that I was the problem. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone I barely recognized. The journey from there to here hadn't been easy. There had been guilt and doubt, and moments where I questioned whether exposing my mother publicly had been too cruel. But those moments passed quickly, because I knew with absolute certainty that I had done the right thing. Not just for me, but for Eleanor and for any future children we might have. I had broken the cycle. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't have saved but recognized. Happy birthday to Eleanor. I hope she had a wonderful day. Gee. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some boundaries needed to remain firm, some distances needed to stay fixed. My mother was managing her disorder, and that was admirable. But it didn't entitle her to access to my life or my daughter's life. Some things, once broken, couldn't be fully repaired, and I was okay with that. The truth was that I had found my family, the one I chose and built with intention. Marcus and Eleanor, Emma and my father and his new wife, Carol and Marcus's extended family, my colleagues who had become friends, the community we were creating in our neighborhood. These were the people who showed up consistently, who loved without conditions, who celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges. This was the family I had always deserved. And the fact that it didn't include my mother didn't make it incomplete. It made it healthy. Standing in my daughter's room that night, watching her sleep with her arms flung wide in toddler abandon, I felt something I had never experienced in my childhood home. Complete peace. No anxiety about criticism coming, no hypervigilance waiting for the next manipulation, no walking on eggshells around someone's fragile ego. Just peace. Just love. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had fought for this and won. The little girl who had once believed she was never good enough had become a woman who knew her worth. The daughter who had been systematically diminished had become a mother who built up. The victim had become the victor, not through revenge, but through the simple revolutionary act of refusing to accept abuse as love. 3 years ago, I had stood in a rehearsal dinner and detonated the truth about my mother's abuse. Today, I stood in my beautiful home with my beautiful family and lived the life that truth had made possible. That was the real revenge. Being happy, being healthy, being whole, being everything my mother had tried to prevent me from becoming. And I had never been more grateful for the courage I had found to fight back,